Hey friends, welcome back to the show. We have a great episode for you today. We're talking, of course, about a longevity compound, and it's not actually that exotic, but it is critical. And it's called protein. You've probably heard about it, but we're really getting into the finer details about bioavailable protein. So stay tuned. It's a great, great episode. But before we do that, I want to thank you all for being here. Of course, we've got lots of new listeners. So welcome to the show. Know that I love hearing from you guys. One of the best ways to interact with me is on Instagram. It's just my name at Natalie Nidham. And I always love getting your questions and comments there. And if you'd like to keep in touch with me a little bit more closely, you can head over to natnidham.com and sign up for my newsletter. And you'll get lots of great info, maybe once or twice a week. We try not to bombard you guys too much. We know that everybody is super busy. Okay. And aside from that, you know what to do. If you get value from this episode, please make sure to share it with your friends, your families, your network, because if the more people hear the episode, the more people we reach, and the more amazing guests we can get for you guys. Now, let's talk a little bit about this episode. Have you ever wondered what the key is to maintaining muscle mass and promoting health? In my latest podcast episode, I discussed the world of essential amino acids and their crucial role in building and preserving muscle, supporting vitality, and promoting overall health and longevity with none other than Angelo Keely. Our conversation goes deep into what essential amino acids really are, what they're used for, and also some little known facts about amino acids. So it really hinges on the right balance of EAAs, essential amino acids, that really helps you to get the results that you're after. And Angelo and I talk about the wide-ranging applications of EAAs, from the NASA protocol for preventing muscle loss in astronauts to the use of EAAs in clinical settings for injury recovery. So you're going to learn a lot about optimizing your EAA intake, the best sources, and how to incorporate them into your daily routine for maximum benefits. So Angelo Keely started Kion in 2017 in Boulder, Colorado, with the dream of building the healthiest, most inspiring work culture at the heart of a fast-growing consumer products company that would be focused on motivating customers to go further on their personal health journeys. And the results have been astounding. Since 2017, Kion has developed many of the highest possible quality supplements on the market and cultivated an incredibly passionate team. So to get your hands on some of these essential amino acids and other great Kion products, there are some fantastic supplements on that page. I use a lot of them myself, but I have to say the EAAs are my favorites. And my favorite flavor, although I talk about it on the podcast, is mango, and lime comes in a close second. But you'll have to find your own. There's 4 different flavors and they're all great. So you want to go to getkion.com/longevity for a 20% discount on Kion amino acids. Now, if you want to learn more about Angelo Keely, you can go to his website, which is angelokeely.com. You can follow him on Instagram at Angelo Keely. And to learn more about Kion, you can follow Kion's account on Instagram, which is plain just Kion, Kion. And now let's jump into the episode.
Hey, folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical professional.
Angelo Keely, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Natalie.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm very excited about this conversation, actually. And, I was super keen about the topic, as you know, I was just telling you. But, then when we have the pleasure of meeting beforehand and you get to know a little bit about the person, then you're like, oh, I'm looking forward to talking to this guy. So I think this is going to be a fun time for all of us. And we're talking about a really great topic. But I think before we get into the topic of essential amino acids and protein and muscle synthesis and all the ways that ties into health and longevity, you've got an amazing, pain to purpose kind of story. Your story of how you came into the space, I think, is really interesting. And so you choose how deep you go, but maybe just give the audience a little bit, because I think it really forms a great context around why you do what you do. So maybe let's share, if you're willing to share with the audience a little bit about how you got here and your had a very interesting childhood and upbringing.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I'm surprised I've never heard that saying before, from pain to purpose. That's cool.
Oh,
I like,
really?
yeah, I
Oh,
like the alliteration. It's funny. I don't know where. It's a
you
good one.
haven't heard that one? Yeah, I feel
No,
like I was actually, as I was saying, I was almost cringing, going, "Ooh,
like too cliche. Well,
yeah,
well, that's the funny thing about all of our, we were just talking before this too, like all the different paths that people have and experiences. And so your
yep."
cliche was my unique revelation.
It was you're like,
So
"Oh, wow, that's cool." So feel free to use it anytime.
okay. Yeah, so I was raised in a family that was very into natural health. My parents had a natural health food store and a natural health food restaurant before I was born. My dad had been a importer and broker of botanicals, so things like ginseng and echinacea and herbs,
Hmm.
basically, in the 70s and
Yeah.
80s. And so I mean, I was born at home. I didn't get a birth certificate till I was 7 when I had to go to like elementary school. I never got a
Okay.
haircut till I was like 9. I mean, we were very hippie, natural health food type people.
Awesome.
And yeah, it was awesome. It was a cool belief system, I guess, to be raised in, set of
Mhm.
values, etc. And part of that too was that my parents they decided to be pescatarians. I think it was kind of like I think it was like, I don't know if it was a hip thing or like a health trend in the 70s and early 80s, but that's something they were into. And because of that and their knowledge of nutrition, it did mean that they wanted to be more thoughtful about their protein nutrition. So
Mhm.
we talked about it a lot because we'd have fish like once a week, but we ate lots of like beans and rice and different combinations of
Okay.
plant-based proteins. And so
Okay.
we would actually, I was taught at a very young age about the importance of combining plant proteins, because if you don't, you won't get a complete essential amino acid profile, which I
Yeah,
don't think most like 4 and 5 year olds are like, we're not, like talking
that's
about that
true.
at dinner. So it's an interesting, yeah, I think just like kind of an interesting thing to be
I can
brought up
see you
in.
at school explaining to the teacher, "No, no, no, I need to have the rice with the lentils, otherwise" and the
Yeah.
teacher looking at you going, "Are you kidding me right now?"
And also my parents, because they were into supplements, we took amino acids, and my mom was an athlete. She was a master swimmer, so she took amino acids
Oh, interesting.
related to sports and for protein nutrition, and she would give them to me. So it's one of the earliest supplements I remember my mom giving to me and like asking me like Angie, can you feel it? And I really could. Like it's one of those things where I could feel it.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so I mean, I'm kind of like uh, marinated in all of those
Mhm.
ideas and all of that culture and all of that. And then, I come of age and I start to develop my own ideas and like, what do I want to do? What do I want to care about? And my parents, I think being an entrepreneurial family, like we were definitely just it was never like a plan for me to like go to here and like get a banking career. It was like
Yeah.
very exploratory, like carve your own path. I was very social. So by the time I became an adolescent, I was getting in trouble. I was like very social. I was very into like partying and drugs and like whatever was
Social
happening,
slash.
people. Yeah. And, and I think I started to separate myself more from my parents and started to take a lot more risks. And I got in a lot other trouble before this, but when I was 16 and a half, I took too much LSD. It was not my first time, but I took too much LSD on one occasion. And I basically had a psychotic break,
Mm.
and I was so scared and paranoid and freaked out. And I was searching for help, and I happened to be in the wrong neighborhood and searched for help from the wrong,
Mm.
much more hardcore people than me. And they stabbed me twice in the back. It required emergency abdominal surgery because
Wow.
they thought my organ I was dying. I had to have my patellar tendon was also. I was stabbed in the knee. My patellar tendon was severed entirely. I had to have it reattached, and then I was just beaten very, very badly. Like when I woke up several days later in the hospital, I couldn't move. I was so black and blue, and I also had staples all the way down my abdomen.
Oh my god, that's
Uh,
what a nightmare.
yeah, it's like, I mean, it's definitely like a dream, and like a nightmare is the right way of describing
Yeah.
it, but it's
Well, it's a
weird.
parent's nightmare and it's a person's night. Like
Hmm.
to a parent to have a child go out into the world like that and just be at their most vulnerable and land in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people is what a freak out.
Yeah, it was definitely
Yeah.
freaky. Yeah. And so that, at 16 and a half, I think that was a very abrupt introduction into adulthood if
Yeah.
adulthood is kind of an acknowledgement of not under the direct care of these other adults who are kind of figuring everything out for
Yeah.
you and planning things. It's like, no, like you're in this world and what you do is going to create your reality. And it's going to, if you choose to do something, it's going to have repercussions. If you choose not to do something, it's going to have repercussions.
Mm.
And so, like, what do you want from life? It's very fragile. And like, what are you going to do with it? And it was just, it was a very intense, abrupt form of that. And, that was, I'm 40 now, so it was 24 years ago. I have been through so many forms of physical therapy, talk therapy, acupuncture, fitness training, meditation retreats. I mean, I've done so many things,
All the
but
things.
I did so much then. At 16, I like really got into it, and it became not something where I was able to integrate it all immediately, but it really kickstarted. It's directly connected to who I am today, and examples of that
Mhm.
are, I think, yeah, just like really committed to my health, and not committed to my health because like my parents told me to, or just what I was brought up in, but like, no, I want that. I want that in my
Yeah.
life. And thinking about nutrition, and it's when I started to realize how important protein nutrition was to a different degree because I had to heal my knee. That was
Yeah, I was
my
gonna say,
yeah,
like,
I had
were
to
you pounding amino acids at that point? Because, I mean, not to jump the gun or
yeah.
anything, but amino acids are pivotal.
I wish I had understood, and so much more research specifically in pre and post surgical situations. Amino acid research has been done in the last 15 years. It
Yeah.
wasn't as like prevalent back then. And so I was eating tons of protein and protein powder, but I wasn't using amino acids to, I think, in a more kind of like clinical
Hmm.
healing type way that I would now if I got in
Yeah.
that kind of situation. But yeah, so it's like it kickstarted that. It kickstarted a whole journey of trying to live the best life I could. It took me on a lot of different adventures, and I ended up living overseas for several years, and worked and lived in France, and then India, and came back to the States, and ran and grew a behavioral healthcare company for a few years that was focused really on actually troubled youth, like on that
Nice.
age group, and trying to help
Yeah.
them find holistic health. And like I like the language of dreams. Like a dream, I kind of came back to my roots, and I started different companies and tried different things, but I found myself in a situation of creating this company that was kind of like the company like my 4-year-old parents would have been proud of, like a
Nice.
company focused on nutrition and like core, like real nutrition, amino acids, protein, like the things that you really need, not maybe like what's the coolest, newest, hippest thing. And
Hmm.
that's like uh avant-garde, but like what is really going to like help people and what have it's been a part of my life. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this position, and that was in 2017. And I thought I knew a lot about protein and amino acids then, but in the journey of creating this company and working with so many different amazing scientists and researchers and just leaders in the field, it's amazing um,
Yeah.
how important protein and foundationally essential amino acids are as part of that protein to do so much in our life and our body, and how important it is as we age. So I'm more bought in now than I've ever been.
Good for you. But without exaggerating, it absolutely builds the foundation on which everything else in the body happens. Like without those, because these essential amino acids we're going to talk about today, which are a subset of amino acids globally. So we need amino acids, but we can make a whole bunch of them. These ones we're going to talk about today, the body can't make, needs them, kind of like your primary colors. Can you say same
Oh,
idea?
that's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah. They like it is so it's without this piece, so much goes wrong. And I do think that there's what's fascinating about them, and I think the case in point for how foundational they are is all of the different applications for them. So, when you were lying broken up in a hospital bed, they would have been a critical component to speeding up your healing. Now, the good news is you were 16 and a half years old. Your body's fairly resilient, but at the same time, it was pretty darn broken, right? So I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to guess that it took you a while to get yourself back together again, especially with staples and whatnot. But then when we look at athletes, right? So whether an elite athlete or a weekend warrior athlete, you've got massive implications of these proteins. And then you keep going, right? And then for longevity, for an aging population, they are critical piece of the puzzle. And so, I think in this conversation, what would be great is to kind of dive into the different areas where they've been found to be so crucial. And then I want to talk a little bit about what makes a good essential amino acid stack, because I think one of the things that people often don't realize about essential amino acids in particular is that the body doesn't use them in a 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 to 1 ratio. Probably missing a few ones there. There's a very there's a very definitive kind of ratio that if you want to be kind of optimal and have as little waste as possible, that you want to deliver these things to the body in so that it does the right signaling and you get the most out of them. So I've pitched you, I don't know, 5-7 different topics here.
I
you
think we
get to
can.
pick,
I think we
you
can
get
cover.
to pick where you start.
I think we can cover them all.
Yeah.
I think the order that you propose makes a lot of sense. Maybe one place to start is just so we're all on the same page, listeners. Like, what are amino acids?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, and
Okay.
then
Well, I mean, I talk about them
yeah,
all the time, so I'm
yeah.
like, oh yeah, everybody knows what amino acid is, but
But I think it really is, because then it all starts to make sense. Why it would apply to athletes? Why it would apply to aging? Why it would
Mhm.
apply to recovery? Why it would apply to also things like weight loss? Like it has so many applications. So
Yep.
um, I also like to talk about analogies. So I'll use analogies. So I'll do my best to use them as well to make it just accessible. I think the best place to start is just to name that in the simplest definition, amino acids are the building blocks of a protein. So
Mhm.
proteins that exist anywhere in nature could exist in a plant, in an animal, in our bodies. Those proteins are made up of these smaller little building blocks called amino acids. But let's start with like what's a protein and why is a protein important, both in our diet and in our body. So I think what gets a lot of attention in nutrition circles over the last 10, 20 years has been way more conversation around the other two macronutrients, which are carbohydrates and fat. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like, do you really need carbohydrates? How much? What about fat? What types of fats? There's a lot of discussion around that. And I think that this conversation really is not about that.
Mm-mm.
It's because carbohydrates and fat, their primary role in the body is fuel. It's an energy source. It's like, for an analogy, if you put gasoline into your car or you charge it, if it's an electric vehicle, or similar with your house, if you buy electricity from the grid or have solar panels or use natural gas, whatever it is, those are energy sources that then get converted inside your house to actually run the dishwasher, to turn
Mhm.
on the lights, to run the TV, to make the car go. Protein can be used as that, but it's not its primary source. The primary
Mhm.
reason that you use protein is quite different. It's actually to help rebuild or repair your car or your house. So like, let's say you want to your bathroom's really old, you want to remodel it. Like you need new materials. So protein is
Mhm.
like that. Or let's say that the carpet has been worn out and worn out and worn out. You need to replace the carpet. Well, you need new
That tile.
the tile. Yeah, okay. The tile. You need to
Carpet's out.
yeah, okay. You need to replace that tile. So to replace that tile, you need new materials, and that is why we eat protein and how protein functions in our body. How is that so? Well, maybe one thing to start with is just to understand that our bodies are made of proteins.
Yep.
So over half the body is liquid, water. Of the part that is not, the part that is solid mass, over 50% of that is made up of proteins. So that includes things like all your vital organs, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your spleen, but it's also things like all of your lean muscle, your skin, and things that are like your hair, of course, but things that are less familiar to people, like um, enzymes.
Yeah.
Enzymes are proteins, hormones, and even things like neurotransmitters. The chemical messengers in our brain are the metabolites of proteins. They're amino acids or the metabolites of those amino acids. So all of these things are actual proteins inside of our body. But what happens in our body, just like the tile in our house, is it wears out. And all of these millions of proteins throughout our body are at different life stages of how long that protein will last before it's basically too old to still function properly. And
Mhm.
when an individual protein is no longer functioning properly, it literally breaks apart. And that's called protein breakdown. And so the little, like, there's millions of them, but I just look at my skin and I think, oh, it's made of all these little million proteins. There's a little protein in there that breaks apart. And when it breaks apart, what you notice is, oh, it's made of all these individual amino acids. And of those individual amino acids, some of them can actually be reused. Some of them, let's say you're replacing the tile and you're like, actually, this section of the tile, this is like kind of a cool
Mm-hmm.
little subsection of like cool, I don't know, Mexican unique tile we bought,
Yeah,
not just
yeah.
like the Home Depot stuff. I'm going to reuse that and put it in this other place in the house, right? There's some of the amino acids you can actually reuse, but some of them you can't. They're old. So they get converted to urea and you pee them out. Like you literally just excrete them. So now I need to rebuild the skin tissue or heart tissue or an enzyme or hormone. And I've got some amino acids, but I don't have enough. So where do I get those amino acids to literally rebuild the proteins of my body, of all these functions? Well, I consume new amino acids via traditionally protein, whole food protein. I eat beans and rice together, or I eat steak or milk or eggs, etc. Or you can also consume things like protein powders or
Mm-hmm.
essential amino acid supplements that have a much more concentrated exact form of them, which we can go more into later. But when I
Yeah.
consume these, I digest them, they go into my blood, and then they enable my body to rebuild the proteins throughout my body. So you can understand protein nutrition and then fundamentally amino acid nutrition is core to just maintaining your whole body. And I left it off some things like your immune system. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
I know for sure. Your
so much of your
muscles.
body is run by
Yeah.
these proteins throughout your body. So it's really fundamental, I think, just to have that base knowledge so that then when you start to talk about, well, how does this play out with aging, or how does this play out with
Mm-hmm.
sports performance or with weight loss, you make sure we all kind of understand like that's why it's so fundamental.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I couldn't. That was a really good explanation. Actually, I think that and it's funny because I talk about amino acids because I talk about peptides, and
Hmm.
peptides are proteins. They're
Hmm.
just they're peptides are small proteins,
Unique
and those
specialized proteins and
they're
amino acid
specialized
chains. Yeah.
proteins, exactly, like they're signaling
Yeah.
molecules,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
Or they're, in the case of certain other categories, they could be epigenetic switches.
Hmm.
But it's understanding that it's just as ATP is the energy currency of the body, is these or these amino acids are the building currency of the body.
Hmm.
It's the stuff we're made of in so many ways. So, all right. So this is a perfect laying the groundwork. We've got our base layer here.
Yeah.
We're all on the same page. So so let's look at different applications. So let's look now at how much protein are we able to, and this is a big one. Like, when we eat a steak or we eat an egg or we eat beans and rice, like
Hmm.
whatever protein food we're eating, and there's some degree of protein and amino acids in pretty much everything you eat, because they live by the same laws of nature. They're made up of amino acids
Hmm.
as well. But there becomes an issue of extraction and efficiency of extraction of any amino acids from the food that we eat. And I think this is where things start to get really fuzzy for people, right? Is understanding. And interestingly enough, as pescatarians, like, fish is one of the easier proteins to break down. I
Hmm.
think meat
It's a
is a lot
very
harder.
it's a very high quality protein.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
bioavailable,
Hmm.
right? Um, but and so maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, like the
I
different
think that's
foods,
good. Yeah,
availability.
I think starting out with whole food proteins before you kind of even get to
Yeah.
supplements is a great way of just making sure, yeah, laying the foundation again. So to evaluate proteins, there's a couple different systems out there. You could Google them, like the protein digestibility amino acid corrected score. Or maybe it switched up the letters, but they have ways basically where they've done very clear scientific analysis of all these different types of protein sources to evaluate them against each other. And this is how you evaluate it, and you would decide whether or not one is more valuable as a protein source, right? Because something
Yeah.
could have other micronutrients in it or minerals, but as pure protein source, how valuable is it? So the first thing you look at is how digestible is it? And digestible means when I consume this protein source, can my body actually break apart the individual proteins and get the amino acids out of it?
Mm-hmm.
And general guidelines are that plant proteins are more difficult, animal proteins are easier.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say animal proteins, it doesn't necessarily mean meat. That includes dairy and eggs. Now that that said, someone could be lactose intolerant, for example, and
Yep.
that would be separate from the idea of how well the protein overall can be digested.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, though, plant proteins are more difficult and animal proteins are easier. So as soon as you start evaluating, you're going to see like, oh, there's this kind of advantage to the animal proteins in terms of their digestibility. And actually, meats and fish, they're like, I mean, there's differences among them, but it's not like fish is like radically more digestible
No.
than
Yeah.
red meat or chicken protein. Then the
Well,
next
as long as
question.
you chew it, you're good.
Yeah, as long as you chew it.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah, you chew it. And I just want to name two. We haven't talked about age yet. As soon as we talked
No.
about
Yeah.
age, these things will start. There's a whole additional level that's really important to understand. So let's just
100.
assume we're actually
Yep.
talking with young, healthy adults, people,
Yep.
and I'm say people below 30.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm all
Yeah.
in with you.
Yeah. So
The nutritionist is nodding.
yeah. So then after that, so then the question is, okay, well, of the protein source, if it's digestible, how much of it is essential amino acids? And you brought this
Mm-hmm.
up earlier. In a dietary protein source, there are 20 amino acids. There's more than 20 dietary amino acids. There's things like creatine, which is not a technically it's an
Mm-hmm.
amino acid, but it's not one of these protein amino acids that actually builds the proteins. It's more of like a signaling molecule.
Yeah. It's its own
It's
thing.
not a signaling molecule. It's actually an energy source. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
unique thing. But of the amino acids that actually go into building these proteins in our body, there's 20 of them. But 9 of them are essential. Like you said, they're like the primary colors, and 11 are non-essential. And the reason those 9 are essential is our body cannot make them. It cannot synthesize them. The other 11, our body can actually synthesize. It can take those primary 9, the essential 9, and make the other ones. The other reason, though, why they're really important, these essential amino acids, is because they aren't just a building block, they include signaling molecules.
Mm-hmm.
So the leucine, particularly, but also the isoleucine and the valine, and even the lysine, they play a role in telling the body to build new proteins. They're not just say like the bricks that are being
Yeah.
built. They're like the general contractor telling them to get
They're
going and to start.
preloaded bricks.
Yeah.
No, they're preloaded bricks. They
Yeah.
come with the mortar. You just gotta like put them together. They
Yeah.
stick.
So when you consume, and we'll go into this more later, when you consume higher doses of these essential amino acids, it promotes more communication throughout the body to rebuild itself, rebuild the skin, rebuild the muscle, build new muscle, etc. So you really want it to be highly digestible, and then you want to make sure that it's got all of these essential amino acids. Sorry, I kind of skipped a step there. First of all, you want to make sure it has all the essential amino acids, which is what I was just saying earlier about beans and rice. If you only eat
Yeah.
beans, you only eat rice, they don't. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to combine them. You need to have all the essential amino acids together, or else it's an incomplete protein. And then once, if you have a source that's complete, then which typically again is animal proteins, it's not plant proteins. There's things like soybeans, buckwheat, quinoa that have a higher profile of the essential amino acids, but they're much less than
Yeah.
animal proteins. Then it's like, well, how much of these essential amino acids? And again, you know, the animal proteins are higher in that. So I think if you're just thinking about foods, you're not getting into like supplements, even like protein powders, you start to notice that the animal proteins are denser in these
Yeah.
essential amino acids and they're more digestible. Another question you might want to think about is how much other caloric content am I getting?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think this is why things like lean meats and lean fishes are often promoted, is because you can get a higher density of the essential amino acids and the protein without as much of the additional, say, saturated fat. If I eat like really heavy fat, I don't know, like ground beef or something like that, versus like a lean chicken breast. But the
Mm-hmm.
same thing is true for plant proteins, because plant proteins
Mm-hmm.
aren't covered in fat, but they're covered in carbs.
Yeah.
And you can consume tons of calories trying to get just a much smaller amount of essential amino acids than you would get if you just had an egg,
Yeah.
or you just
Yeah.
had, a piece of chicken or some Greek yogurt or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are all really, that's kind of think about it just on a pure like protein analysis side. Now this, we'll go ahead and I think we get a little bit nerdier because you're
Let's do it.
geekier and your audience is geekier. And this is what is really interesting science in the last, several years, is that there is something also to consuming the protein on its own. And this becomes so much more important as you get older. But
Yeah.
if you consume 30 grams of beef protein on its own, it stimulates as much muscle protein synthesis and actually associated whole body protein synthesis. So let's just say total communication of the body to rebuild new proteins, as does 70 grams, so more than double that in beef protein if you eat the beef protein as part of a mixed meal.
So wait, so you need 70 grams of beef protein as a mixed meal to get the same benefit of 30 grams of beef protein all by itself.
In terms of it, in terms of how it
In
works,
terms of
the
that's signaling.
stimulation,
Yeah,
the signaling. Like if you just did a crazy like hardcore workout and then
yeah.
you've got all this signaling and then you could still digest the protein from the mixed meal and utilize it. But if you didn't just do a training, if you haven't stimulated protein synthesis or it's a day off or whatever, like literally less than half the amount of meat will stimulate as much muscle protein synthesis as
Huh.
over, yeah.
That's interesting. And so how much distance do you need between that protein refeed, let's call that,
Uh-huh.
and any other food you might want to eat? Like, would you
Uh,
eat your, like, because like bodybuilders, they're all about the chicken breast and the
yeah.
broccoli,
Hmm.
right? Or they're about the chicken breast, the broccoli, and the rice if they're doing that thing. But how much separation would you want from between your protein? Like, do you need
I'd probably give it
an
like an
hour and a
hour.
half?
I'd probably
Like an
give it like an
hour?
hour, yeah, because basically what you want. So here's why, and I would say is it's probably going to differ on age
Yeah.
and activity levels and how well you digest things, et cetera. But overall, what happens is, and why this is important, and then when you start to compare this to protein powders and amino acid supplements, it's going to be mind blowing. Um,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
thing is like how quickly you're able to digest the protein and the concentration of the essential amino acids can hit peak levels in your blood. And
Mm,
so when it's mixed up with the other foods, then it can't do
it
that.
just takes
Whereas if
time.
you eat the
Yeah.
meat and you can digest it and then it gets into your blood, then it's like you're good. Then you can eat the other foods. And I just want, I mean, I don't want to tell people or try to convince people like now for all your future meals, you always need to eat your meat separately. Because I mean, it's like you're not going to enjoy life maybe. And it's like it's nice
No,
to
people are going
combine
to hang
foods.
up on
Yeah.
us. They're going to be like, "Get
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of here! It's
Yeah.
complicated enough."
If you're trying to live more optimized in certain types of contexts and it's like a snack period, you might say like, oh yeah, for my snack, I'm like only going to have Greek yogurt. I'm
Yeah,
not going to consume, other things with it at the same
or a
time.
chicken breast. You're
Yeah,
just
I'm
going to
only
have
going to have a
chicken
chicken
breast
breast. Yeah,
or a
whatever
burger
it is.
patty or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Um,
100%.
so now, and the reason for that again is because you get these peak concentrations. So then if you take something like a whey protein isolate, right,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it has 3 times the impact of that lean beef in the same dosage. Now, like why? Like why would it have so much more? It's because the whey protein isolate, you've stripped out the carbs, you've stripped
Mm-hmm.
out the fat, and it's like so perfectly and ideally digestible for the body compared to even that lean beef that you're trying to digest and break down, that it again hits the bloodstream so much more quickly. Also, there is something to like the actual amino acid profile of a whey is
Yeah.
slightly more ideal than even a beef protein in terms of it has a
Yeah.
bit more leucine and isoleucine, and like its ability to stimulate protein synthesis is a little bit better. So if you take a protein powder, it's even better than
If
that
it's
beef.
whey protein, because I want to.
If it's whey protein
If it's
isolate,
whey
that
protein,
would not be like a pea
no.
protein
Okay, so
powder. But
so I
I
want to
would
ask
say
you,
is
what
like,
about the beef isolate protein? So I've always been curious, where do they fit? Because they're
uh,
very high in collagen.
mhm,
Like, what about the beef isolate? Where do they fit? Because to me, the vegetarian proteins, they don't agree with me. Like, I
mhm.
just don't do well with them.
Even a whey isolate, even an
No,
isolate.
I do great with whey.
Oh, okay,
Like, whey protein is my jam.
okay,
I had to do a whole gut reset to tolerate whey, but now that
uh-huh.
I tolerate whey, that's all I have as a
Oh,
post
okay,
workout.
great.
But I'm just curious about the beef isolate proteins because I've always because again, like if I have a lot of clients and let's say they don't tolerate whey,
Hmm.
a lot of people's fallback is like, oh, okay, we'll just go to this pea or this hemp or whatever. And for me, I will tend to steer them towards the beef isolate.
I would steer them towards the beef isolate or towards an egg white isolate. I think
Yeah.
that those are they're not as good as the whey simply because the amino acid profile simply isn't quite as good, the essential amino
Yeah.
acid profile, but they're going to be better than what a plant-based protein powder is going to have. And the only reason I asked you about or asked you a second question on the vegetarian is just to name whey is vegetarian. It's not vegan, but if you are vegetarian, right? Right, if you're
Yeah.
vegetarian, you can totally consume whey. It's just a dairy
Why?
product. Well, vegetarian just means you don't eat meat, but most vegetarians still consume dairy products.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
And
if
like a
you're
vegetarian,
a lacto vegetarian,
yeah,
then and as a matter of fact, in Ayurveda, lacto ovo vegetarian would be considered like what they would use for people that they're trying to heal from certain things.
yeah.
In like right. So and then pescatarian, what you talked about earlier, like even in your upbringing, you ate fish, but you ate very little fish from the sounds
Hmm.
of it, right?
Yeah,
But
we ate
were
like
you
once a
eating
week.
dairy as well?
Yeah, we ate dairy. We ate dairy every
Oh,
day.
okay.
Yeah, we
All
ate
right.
dairy every day, and like, yeah, I mean, we were not vegan. We were not like only plants.
Mm-hmm.
But also just like, I mean, how many if you're not eating meat, it's like how many times can you eat eggs and milk? Like, and those are your
Well,
best
and
protein
eggs,
sources, and cheese, So you end up eating a lot of like beans and rice and cheese because
yeah.
those, beans and rice and
Yeah.
cheese and some vegetables and
You
like,
better be moving your body, man,
yeah,
because beans, rice, and cheese, that is
it's
some kind of
caloric.
recipe
Yeah.
for anabolism, and not the kind we want.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that's the only reason I
So,
highlighted that is that for people that
yeah,
are, that are don't want to eat animals, but they're open to dairy products, like whey it's the best, it's like the best protein source you can get, really. So
yeah,
beef isolate is good. It's just it's not as high. And it also really depends. Like sometimes that whole category can be really different if it's like, is it like a bone broth isolate? Like, yeah, what
right.
really is it? You just have to look at the amino acid profile and actually see what is the actual ingredient panel and what is the amino acid profile, because they vary more. But if it looks more of actually like the amino acid profile of true beef meat, then it's a good, yeah, I mean, that's a good profile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
But there,
can go online, guys, and just check that out.
oh,
Like
yeah.
you can look up, you can Google what's the amino acid profile of beef, and then compare it to the amino acid profile of whatever beef isolate protein powder you're using. And just because if there's, it should be like a key copy. It should pretty much follow the same line. But if you start to see gaps, then that's going to really have an impact on how efficiently your body can use it to rebuild.
Yep. And if it's like a bone broth isolate, what's likely is that it's not a beef meat. It's not like broken down beef, right? It's
Right.
coming from like some derivative process of the broth, et cetera. So it's going to be very high in collagen and
Yeah.
these other good amino acids, but those are not. It's not going to be really high in essential amino acids.
Interesting.
And so collagen, I mean, this is a slight diversion. Collagen is cool. I think it's
Hmm.
particularly good if you're over 50 because it's really high in hydroxyproline, proline, glycine, these non-essential amino acids that promote skin, hair, joints. But if you're younger, if you're eating good quality protein, like you're not having a really hard time synthesizing those amino acids or maintaining that.
Mm.
Um, and so it's like I think it makes a lot less sense the younger you are. The older you are, it makes more sense if you really want to supplement with that. Um,
Well, exactly. And we should probably talk about why, and maybe you're getting to that, like why as we age, this all becomes way more important. Because anyway, you can
yeah,
go ahead. You
yeah.
fill in
Let's
the blank.
let's let's finish. Let's
You're the
finish.
guest. You fill in the
Well,
blank.
no, let's finish the connection of like the protein, and then we'll get to the amino acids, then we'll come back and we'll
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about age, right?
yeah.
Okay, so where we were was whey protein 3 times the amount of muscle protein synthesis as a piece of meat, right? And so when someone online is arguing like, why do you even have to take these protein powders? Why don't you just eat real food, right? I think you should eat real food. I agree. Eat real
Yeah. Hmm.
foods. Like how, like enjoy meals with people you love and get into cooking and like eat all these micronutrients. And if you have certain cases of you're an athlete or you're aging and you don't digest as well as you used to, which we'll get more to, or you're trying to lose weight, or any of these other really important reasons, and you're trying to figure out how to add more protein, if I take the 20 grams of a whey protein isolate and it's 3 times the muscle protein synthesis that I'm going to get from 20 grams of the beef,
Yeah,
and it's a snack period, it makes more sense for me
for sure.
potentially. It's like it's a totally reasonable decision to make. They're not one to one. They're actually different. And so now
Yeah.
here's the mind blowing thing when you get to essential amino acids. So in all these quality proteins we've been talking about, beef, whey especially, about half of them, like so in a gram of whey protein, about half of it is essential amino acids, and the
Mm.
other half is non-essential. Now, our body needs non essential amino acids, but it does not need it does not need as many are contained in each gram of like whole food protein. So a
Right.
portion of them are converted into sugars. They're converted into urea. We pee them out, but more than anything, they're converted into sugars as like an energy source. Some though are used to help rebuild tissues, etc. But what we've seen in multiple studies is that if you have someone take just basically 5 grams of essential amino acids, 5 grams of essential amino acids, and 5 grams of non-essential amino acids each,
Like
right,
together.
like together, or
Yeah.
5 grams of non-essential amino acids. So basically, like only essential, only non-essential, and a mix of the two.
Yeah.
It's clear the non-essential create no stimulation in protein synthesis, zero. So when they're on their own, they create none. When they're in addition to the essential amino acids, they generate none. The essential amino acids generate all of the signaling and all of the new protein synthesis. There's what responsible for it. So you don't get there's nothing additive from
Mm-hmm.
having the non-essential amino acids purely for like signaling and stimulating this muscle protein synthesis. So then if you were to compare an essential amino acid supplement, and I say a supplement, but it needs to have a specific type of formula, which we'll
Yeah.
get into, and this is all public open source, it's not proprietary, it's like published in tons of papers. If you take a supplement that has a more ideal formula, it's basically like whey, but it's enhanced with certain increases of leucine, isoleucine, valine, lysine. It, in a young adult, has 3 times the impact as the whey protein.
Oh, wow.
So we're talking so many degrees of
So it's
separation
6 times
from a
and then
whole
3. So
food
that's
protein.
18. So that's 18 times more than your 30
The,
grams of
the, the,
whey.
uh,
Because the whey
uh
protein was 6 times more, and then that's 3 times
No,
more.
it's
So
three
3 times.
times more. It's three times
Oh,
three.
it's 3. Sorry.
Yeah,
I thought it was
yeah,
6.
yeah,
Okay. Anyway,
yeah. So
it's a
it's like,
lot.
yeah, it's a lot more. And then, and I would just name like this is all in young adults.
Mm-hmm.
This is in young, healthy
Mm-hmm.
adults. The scale on each one of these becomes even more dramatic as we age. So there you start to see like, oh, so now I can kind of see then similarly, I just made the argument for why maybe a protein powder makes sense. If you're really trying to be efficient and you're really, again, not trying to replace meals, but trying to optimize your daily essential amino acid intake for one of these goals we can start to get into, the role of an essential amino acid supplement becomes so obvious. You can take one scoop of this and it's like eating tons of meat in terms of the amount of, new protein synthesis that gets stimulated. And you can start to see like, wow, if I, without having to eat this huge additional extra meal, being able to slip it in between different stages of day, having it first thing in the morning, taking it before, during, or after exercise, you're like, oh wow, it's like it's very flexible and can be utilized in these different ways, and that's why it's been studied so much and can be so helpful. So maybe with that, we could start to get into like, okay, well, what
Yeah.
about these different use cases?
Well, I think the distinction to make, and I think this is really important for everybody, if you take nothing away from this, it's that essential amino acids are not just building blocks. They're building blocks that signal,
Hmm.
right? So and that's a massive difference in language and in effect, really, because it's not just, you're not just bringing in the material. It's, your analogy was actually better than mine, the
Uh-huh.
preloaded mortar.
Uh-huh.
Your analogy is you're bringing in the material with the guy who's going to install them. And so, right?
I have the best study to emphasize that too, which is
Okay,
the which is
bring it.
which is the NASA study. Well, it was a series of NASA studies, and they're almost 20 years old now. But basically, there were astronauts. The NASA obviously has astronauts that they're sending to space that don't undergo resistance anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
get them to maintain muscle mass, right, and not just waste away? You can feed them things, but they need stimulus. They need some kind of message, right? They don't just need the building blocks of protein. They need something that's going to communicate, hey, build, maintain muscle. So you could develop different types of training modalities or maybe hormone interventions, et cetera. And one of the things they considered was, could amino acids be used? So they sponsored a series of studies, and it was very breakthrough, where they had people on Earth be at complete bed rest for 28 days. So
Can you
can
imagine?
you imagine volunteering for that? Like I'm volunteering to
Yeah.
like go to the bathroom in a bedpan, not get up for 28 days. And these are like young, healthy adults too. Like this is
Yeah.
not like, like older people who might like, oh, whatever, I'll lay down for a month. No, this is like young, healthy adults. And so they had to lay there for 28 days. They were given, average meals, but then as an intervention, they were given basically the equivalent of like 3 servings of Kion aminos. So like 15 grams of essential amino acids. And again, it's a very similar formula to what we're talking about, but they were given that 6 times a day. So that's a lot. That would be right? Six times
That's
three,
a lot.
it's 18 servings in a day, right? But again, they're dealing with a very clinical situation. These people are at bed rest. They don't, is there any way that we can intervene and not have them lose muscle? After
Hmm.
28 days of bed rest, there was no net muscle loss. There was actually slight net muscle increase. There was
That's
lot
insane.
there was loss of strength, there was loss of some performance because you're not training your muscles, but literally their muscles didn't waste away. And so I think that is such a great example of like, wow, so the amino acids are not just these essential amino acids. Again, they're not just the building block. They're the contractor yelling at the crews, getting them to move, like getting them to do things. Like if you take them in a higher enough dose, they literally will maintain muscle and even build muscle. And,
Wow.
and
At
protein
rest.
proteins at rest throughout the whole body without an external stimuli, without exercise. Again, these people had no exercise in this period, which I think.
So
So I'm
how
glad
much?
you
How much
highlighted
did
that.
they? So how much did they get? It was 5 grams 6 times a day, or 15
15,
grams
15 grams 6 times a
six
day.
times? Yeah, because
Yeah.
15 is a dose, right?
No, 15 is 3 doses.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
one like basically like one scoop. I mean, this is saying of my brand, but it kind of
Yeah,
depends
yeah.
on like
Well, it depends on
what
the
you're
brand,
getting.
the size of
Depends.
the scoop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But basically, yeah. In Kion, it's five. One scoop is 5 grams.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was more than that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
three
so,
scoops is 15 grams of active essential amino acids, and since then we've basically determined that you get benefit from as little as 3 grams, right? But why a brand like ours would go with like a 5 gram serving is because it's kind of the best fit for the most amount of people, and it's more manageable. And you do get more benefit than the 3 grams, but it's actually
mhm.
linear, and it's just as good to take like you get a linear improvement of benefits for each additional gram up to 15 to 18 grams. The reason there's a range, there's a few different studies that have kind of like disputed it. So I typically just say 15 grams. But basically, if you take 6 grams, it literally is proportionally that much better than 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you could take 15 grams at a time and you would get 3 times the benefit as only taking 5 grams.
Wow.
Beyond that, it starts to plateau. There's incremental improvements, but it's not
Well,
as beneficial.
what if you're training your butt off? Like if you're training super hard as an athlete, and now I'm talking like a
Uh-huh.
competitive athlete, or because wasn't there a study done with the Tour de France team at some point that, and this team they were pounding essential amino acids, and Tour de France athlete riders are notorious for by the end of the race they've broken down all the muscle in their
Uh-huh.
body, like their jerseys are flapping on them, and it's some kind of a badge of
Hmm.
honor, right? But I thought that there was a study where one team was using essential amino acids, and I don't know
Hmm.
anything about the formula, but
Yeah.
they were taking a
S-
ton.
So this is interesting. So I'm actually not familiar with that study. I'm definitely going to look up. I'm curious about it. But if I
Yeah,
understand the prompt correctly, they're taking it during the race and they're
yeah, yeah,
pounding it
yeah.
consistently. So it's actually a different use case. So it was a good question because what I am saying at rest,
Okay,
or it would be before a training session or after a training session, but during extended endurance exercise,
mm-hmm.
what happens is we're constantly trying to maintain an equilibrium of amino acids, like a constant steady pool of amino acids in our blood at equal proportions to each other, so that they can be distributed to our organs, to our muscle, all these different things. But what happens is you only have so much in your pool based off of what you ate. Like I eat some
Mm-hmm.
meat or take some amino acids, I break it down, it goes into my blood, and then that's like my free pool of amino acids.
Yep.
When you exercise, you use more amino acids than you would typically use at rest for a couple reasons. One is you actually do end up using some of them for energy. Like
Mm-hmm.
actually, you actually burn some of them the way that you burn like glucose or fats. It's a very small proportion. I think it's 8% of total
Yeah.
usage, but you do use them. On top of that, though, amino acids, particularly leucine, and actually the other two branched chain amino acids, are facilitators at the site of the mitochondria for the production of ATP. So they get
Mm,
used up not as the actual energy source to get converted into ATP, but as facilitators of the process. So you're basically oxidizing all of these additional amino acids, specifically the BCAAs, not for energy, but to facilitate the energy process. So what happens is your blood, you're using them up, right? And if you use up
yeah.
all the amino acids you have in your blood, then where do you get them from?
Mm-hmm.
The one organ, the one part of our body that we're willing to sacrifice. I'm not willing to sacrifice my heart tissue, right?
Nope.
I'm not willing to
Yeah.
sacrifice my liver tissue. I'm willing to
No.
sacrifice my muscles. So what happens is when you don't have enough amino acids in the blood, you start to break down muscle tissue to get those free form amino acids supplied to the blood, then to fuel the process. So, by taking amino acids before exercise and during exercise, you supply your body with additional amino acids to support enhanced energy levels, to reduce muscle fatigue, etc. And if you're doing extended exercise, like more than an hour and a half of endurance, you will start to break down muscle and tap into those essential amino acids from your muscle, and so you do have to consume way more. I don't know. It wouldn't so much be that you need to consume um, more than the 15 grams at once. I
No,
would
but
actually say it'd be based on like the body weight of the person and how much muscle they have, but it's probably more like 5 to 10 grams every hour. Like if you're in
yeah,
Tour de
that
France,
makes
like
sense.
you're just consuming every hour, so you keep them elevated in the blood. Because I don't care how much, whether you're on carbs or you're fat adapted, I don't care how much carbs or fat you consume, it
Yeah.
cannot replace the need of the amino acids to facilitate.
Well, they don't do the same
They
thing.
don't do the same thing.
They,
Yeah.
they don't find they don't have serve the same function. And yeah, no, I mean, and if you think about it, you look at your endurance athletes, like the people that are running marathons and doing Tour de France, like these are not built people. Like these are very catabolic workouts. As a matter of fact, when we're talking to people about weight loss, we're I mean, in my world, I'm steering them away from like long duration kind of steady state workouts. I'm trying to push them more towards hit and stuff like that. A, because it's more achievable for them, but B, because if they're aging and I want them to put on muscle, they're going to do it more easily with shorter, more intense workouts than they are from, dragging themselves around the block for 2 hours a day, which also is not very time effective and slightly
Yeah.
boring.
I mean, I think, don't mean to go on too much of a tangent here, but uh,
Yeah.
cardiovascular exercise is cardiovascular exercise. It's good for your heart. Like
Yeah.
going on a
Exactly.
run is really good for training your heart. And that's, I
Yeah.
think, really what it's good for. It's
Hmm.
not it's not good for building, maintaining lean muscle. It's not good for weight loss. It's not good for
Joints.
joints. Yeah, yeah, it's like it's not but it is good for your heart. I think that, I'm someone who, I try to build cardio into my weekly routines, but I'm not doing it to like maintain a physique or
Hmm.
to live a long time in terms of building and maintaining lean muscle. I'm doing what's kind of like the minimum that I can do to ensure that I maintain good cardiovascular health. I can have a higher VO2 max, like that I can,
Yeah.
my heart functions well, and I can, get oxygen throughout my body. Like that's its goal. But it's a very it's like the last thing I'd choose for weight loss or body composition
Well,
or
and
yeah.
which, yeah, exactly. I mean, and body composition is the right term because,
Yeah.
as we both know, weight loss, you can lose a lot of weight by sacrificing muscle.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
you're no further
It's
ahead on the other
easier.
side.
It's
Yeah.
easier in many ways. You can lose a pound of muscle with a 750 calorie deficit, whereas it's 3,500 calories to lose a pound of fat. And so people who aggressively diet and cut calories and just want to see the scale go down, you not only burn all this fat, but you burn the muscle. Because as
Yeah.
soon as you go into calorie deficit, and again, this is very interesting research from like the last 10 years, a 30% calorie deficit. So, simple math, let's just say I have, I consume 2,000 calories a day. That's not me, but like maybe a more athletic type woman, right? 2,000 calories a day to maintain her current body composition. If she cuts that by 30%, so that'd be 600 calories. Over the course of a week, you could lose a little bit over a pound of fat. That's what they think is going to
Hmm.
happen. But when you cut 30% of your calories, you have a 300% increase for essential amino acid intake. You need to have 3 times the amount of protein in order to maintain your amount of lean muscle. Otherwise, you will go into net protein breakdown. So when you cut those calories, not only do you have to cut the calories, you need to basically replace all your diet with like protein or be supplementing with essential amino acids, et cetera. Otherwise, you're going to lose muscle. And so
Yeah.
the idea of like, oh, I'm just going to go out and exercise and run a lot and then not eat, like you're burning all these calories and you end up burning muscle, and all the protein you consume doesn't get used actually to rebuild the muscle, because since your body's starved, it's actually in a non-ideal way utilizing those essential amino acids in the protein instead to convert them into ATP, which is not
Yeah.
what they're,
Yeah.
what the priority for them would
It's
be.
not ideal. Well,
Yeah.
and I mean, and we won't stay on this sidebar for too long, but this is the reason why, essential amino acids coming to the forefront. It could not be a better time, because in this modern day of GLP-1 agonists
Mm-hmm.
getting used for fat loss, there, you have a you have a perfect storm where people are losing their appetite. So they don't have an appetite, they're eating less. And people, I find, certainly in my world, I'm sure you see the same thing, they don't eat enough protein at the best of times.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't getting enough protein in. And when your appetite goes out the window, that nutrient dense, that energy dense protein becomes a lot harder to consume.
When it's
Plus,
very
people figure
satiating, so that
it's
makes you
very
feel full
satiating,
even
and they figure
sooner.
out
Yeah.
and they figure out pretty quickly that I could eat that chocolate cake and still lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, chocolate cake's looking better to me, to them anyway, not to me,
Yeah.
but to them. And so, the party line that I've adopted is eat protein like it's your job. It's the first thing you're going to eat. But there is not a case where I don't have people using EAAs at the same time. Like, there just isn't, because they can't get enough protein in. And especially after this conversation, that's the ratios of amino acids in the right protein essential amino acid formula that's actually going to stimulate muscle building beyond just providing those building blocks is going to be a critical piece of the puzzle, and is going to get rid of that whole end of the dialogue of, oh yeah, people are losing weight but they're losing their muscle. And it's like, well, they're losing their muscle because they're not feeding it. And I would argue that exercising would be a really good idea when you're doing these things anyway. But anyway, I just
Yeah. And
sidebar on the
yeah, no, I
GLP-1 front.
think
I think they're
I think it's
critical.
such an important point, because yeah, it's like, I mean, basically what the GLP-1 antagonists have done, that is they've made it like possible to it not have to be so willpower based. Like, it just makes it easier to not have an appetite, right? And if it
Yeah.
makes it easier to not have an appetite and you consume less than you burn in a day, then you're going to lose weight. That said, you're going to lose muscle if you do that and you don't prioritize this. But I think, again, you've made such a
Yeah.
good point, and I think the way you're coming back to it, like, it's even helpful for me to have this dialogue with you, because I think you just keep highlighting the chemical messenger nature of the essential amino acids. The fact that you don't have to have worked out today. If you just take this first thing in the morning, you're stimulating a new bout of protein synthesis. Like, really understanding the fact that it's not just a building block, but it's like, I mean, it's not. It's. I don't want to. I don't want to make it an equivalent, because it's not as good as lifting weights, but it's of the same. It does the same thing, not to the same degree. Like, it's not like
No.
you're
Yeah.
taking aminos is like, and then you can just never have to lift weights again or something. But like,
Yeah.
but it really does. It does the same thing. It will promote building and maintaining muscle in a way that resistance training does. It's not only the protein. It's not only the building block.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so we've covered our athletes. You can definitely take them before. If you're doing long duration workouts, you can definitely take them during. You can absolutely take them after for recovery. For people who have an office job, you can take them as your snack in the middle of the afternoon. Great pick me up, I think.
Yeah.
I definitely try and get my clients to do that, and or start your day with them, either way, or both in a perfect world. There's also a use case scenario. I don't know how you feel about this, about taking them before bed.
Yeah, I think it's fine to take them before bed. I mean, I think the way I would think about taking them before bed is that it's basically going to give you one more spike of protein synthesis while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So, if you try to eat a few hours before you go to bed with
Yeah.
the intention of like having already digested your food and having better sleep, by taking them right before bed, you're not starting this whole digestive process again, but you are
Hmm.
sneaking in one more spike of protein synthesis. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in terms of its ability to actually like improve the quality of sleep, there's not, I don't think that I'm not saying that there's
No,
not a
I don't.
there, but like there's not, I'm not aware of science. I think for improving sleep, it's actually a different concoction of different amino acids.
Glycine. Yeah,
Yeah,
glycine's a sweet sleep.
glycine is a great one. I mean, at Kion, we actually have one, but it's much more tryptophan, and it's
Hmm.
GABA, and it's theanine, and it's like those actually are the three, glycine as well, but those three
Yeah,
are the ones that have the most research
yeah,
specifically for helping you to fall asleep, keeping you asleep, and
yeah.
user reported improvements in sleep.
Yeah, no, I wasn't even talking about it for sleep quality. It was
Yeah.
more a question of, if you're getting good quality sleep and your growth hormones going up and your body's doing some repair work while you're sleeping, it's a perfect opportunity to have these guys around
Yep.
ready to go kind of thing. Okay, so athletes, we talked a little bit, even in the case of injury, I think for recovery, they're very powerful as well. I mean, for all the reasons that we've been talking about, you can think of an athlete as someone who doing these micro injuries over and over again, the amino acids. So if you have a macro injury, it stands to reason. And especially when you're not able to move as much because you're injured, great use case scenario there. But we're gonna run out of time in a little while. And I
Yeah.
want to get to the longevity piece. I want to get to, we'd even talked a bit about the GLP-1s, but I do want to talk about the older client, like the 50 plus, 60
Hmm.
plus. For me, like I'm beating my parents about the head with the bottle of essential amino acids, saying, you need to take this every morning. Okay, well, I take 3. No, you need 5. It's like this conversation. Well, I don't like, it's probably like they were with me when I was a little kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you get into these negotiations, and I'm like, this isn't a negotiation. This is what you're doing. But anyway, the reasons why they become so much more important as we age, I think, and I'm going to let you riff on this on your
Yeah.
own. I'm just going to toss it out at you. There's 2 reasons why I think, for sure, maybe there's a third I'll come up with. Number 1, digestion goes to hell in a handbasket as you get older. Your ability to break down, assimilate, and absorb things starts to go down the tubes. Number 2, there's a higher need for them because you just need more repair. And there was a number 3 that I was really excited about that has jumped out of my head. So probably you'll come up with it yourself. But also, actually, the other thing is, I'll say with my parents, it's hell on wheels getting them to eat enough protein. Like, it's hard enough to get a young person to eat enough protein. It's a nightmare with 70 and 80-year-olds to get them to eat enough protein. So if you can at least, again, we're back to the analogy of it's like when I was a toddler and they were the
Uh-huh.
adult, trying to sneak things into them that's actually going to make a difference.
Well, yeah, I think what you laid out, it's exactly that. What happens as we age, and I think it becomes that much more important when we talk about people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. But it actually starts at about age 30. So
So depressing.
yeah, I mean, it's like when I say younger adults, I'm saying people in their
Like
I'm saying I'm
20-year-olds.
saying I'm saying people in their 20s, which is crazy because normally I'm like, oh, they're young, they're like 50, like that's what I think in my head. But like in terms of the way that we both digest all things, but protein especially,
Mhm.
it becomes diminished our ability to do it. But the other thing that's really interesting, and I think this was the third thing that you were thinking about, and I know you're aware of, is that the sensitivity to stimulate mTOR, which is is basically the thing that tells the body to build new proteins.
Mhm.
That process, we don't exactly understand why, but previous amounts of amino acids in protein simply don't stimulate it anymore. So
Yeah.
you eat this protein, it breaks down to amino acids, and like it just doesn't. There's no mTOR doesn't get stimulated. So it's like you just don't build new muscle, you just don't build new skin. It just doesn't happen. You have to increase the amount of the amino acids. So it kind of goes back to the conversation earlier about like trying to get a higher concentration of the essential
Yeah.
amino acids in the blood. Well, you need even more. And here the formula becomes even more important. If you can get it
Mhm.
to 40%, the leucine to 40% of the formula, and then so actually this is how you start. You start with human skeletal muscle. If you do a biopsy of human skeletal muscle, and you looked at the exact amounts of each amino acid in that muscle tissue, you would
Yeah.
have proportions of them. You then increase the leucine to 40%, increase the isoleucine and the valine to maintain their original proportions. And then you increase the lysine as well, because the lysine is basically slower to get into the muscle fiber and it can become a limiting factor. That is the formula that's published by NASA and NIH, and it's what's on Kion Amino's product. It's what it's on, there's like tens and tens, if not hundreds of studies where people have been building on this research over the last 20 years. That formula helps overcome this anabolic resistance. It's highly effective in young adults, but it especially works when you start getting into anyone who's anabolically resistant. And anabolically resistant is aging, but it's also someone who's been injured. When you're injured and you're in a stress response, your body's not like, oh, let's like really build up all this muscle. It's just trying to like survive, And so it doesn't prioritize like getting strong and vibrant, it's trying to just like
building glutes. No.
yeah, just trying to like survive. So as we age, it gets worse and worse, decade after decade after decade. So the example I gave earlier, the whey protein powder for 20 something year olds, basically, if you compare that to taking amino acids, the amino acids had 3 times the amount of protein synthesis.
Right.
When they've done analysis of women in their 60s, it's 6 times. 6 times the amount of protein synthesis from essential amino acids is from taking a protein powder. That shows you how much it matters to get the essential amino acids in the most digestible format, to increase the proportions of certain amino acids, and why they can have this impact to overcome that anabolic resistance. So I'm in your boat where it's like, I'm trying, like I have young kids, so I'm trying to get my kids to eat enough protein. If they really aren't, I'm like, well, why don't you take like a few aminos, and like eat it with that, and like it, kind of help them go. For me, every day, I'm just, I'm 40, I'm trying to stay healthy. I'm trying to not have 8% loss in strength every year, which is what's predicted once you hit 40, or like 2 to
Not if you
3%.
lift weights.
Yeah,
I'm here to tell you.
2 to 3% loss in muscle mass. Like I'm trying to like protect it and like maintain it. So I'm eating protein, taking amino acids. For my parents, I'm like, take it take it like your life depends on it. The protein thing. Like for real, it's like if you are, in your 70s, like just be taking it. And amazing studies with those types of cohorts. You look at again at like 60 something year old women, they gave them basically 3 servings per day, 1.5 serving, like I think a scoop and a half of
Okay.
aminos 2 times a day. And that cohort, without any other changes, they were doing resistance training, like light body weight type training, like 3 times a week. They put on 10 pounds of lean muscle within 3 months.
That's insane. Like all of them?
I mean, that was the average. That was like the
Oh, the
mean average.
average.
That was the mean
Yeah.
average of what it was. So some were a
That's
little less. Yeah,
crazy.
they had to
Even
put,
an
yeah,
average.
yeah.
Even an average. Like
I
you would
mean,
think
yeah.
10 would be the gainers,
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, but it's like, and it's again, they had other healthy behaviors going on, but that's the thing, as you get older, you can be doing the same, and actually it's really important to know the resistance training you used to do when they measure the impact of the protein synthesis that gets stimulated, it simply doesn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
You used to like go to the gym and do whatever, the push-ups, pull-ups, bench press, these things, and it like if they do a muscle biopsy, they'd be able to see the increases and the changes in the amino acid profiles to see that like, oh, there's this muscle protein synthesis spike. Once you hit a certain age, it just stops. It doesn't do it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
and then
like
you got to push it. So there's ways to fix it.
you got to
Like
push it
this
even
is
more, and you can use these types of nutritional therapies. So it's like, yeah, as you get older, the reasoning behind it becomes so much. If you want to like live and be strong and vibrant into your older age, these are like non-negotiables. It's not like
yeah.
it's
No, I'm with
it's
you.
cool to have kind of, or I want to be fit, I want to like look good, or I want to like
No, I
feel
want
good.
to
It's
be able
like
to carry my own growth. Like let's just get it down to basics,
I want
right?
to be
I
able
want
to
to be
walk
able to
around my
carry my own.
block.
I don't want to worry about falling down and breaking something. Like these are the things that people need to really think about as they age, right? I mean for a certain population of people like me that still has it in their head, oh, maybe I'll go to CrossFit or whatever, that's fine. But if you're talking about a population of people that have been sedentary most of their lives for whatever reason, I mean, maybe they had crazy office jobs, whatever the case may be, it's never too late to start exercising. But if you didn't have the muscle mass before, it's going to be really hard to get it later. So you're now going to need everything, every tool at your disposal to make it happen. And this becomes these essential amino acids. which I like. Ever since our first conversation, I like to call the formula you've created the Kion, or the formula you've based Kion on. It's essential amino acids with the BCAAs built in,
Yeah, and so
and
they're actually called,
right,
it's called leucine enriched amino
yeah,
acids.
exactly. Like
Yep.
there's that
Uh-huh.
term, right?
Yep.
But this is where, I mean, so many people have turned, like, BCAAs were all the rage for the longest time. Then people turned their backs on them, recognizing that you were missing a whole bunch of players in the thing, but forgetting that especially as we age, we need that extra stimulus. And so, what you've done is you've built it in, you've baked it into the cake here so that you get everything in one place. So I
That's
just think
exactly
that's,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
it's essential. It's an essential amino acid complex that is specifically higher in the branch chain amino acids.
yeah.
Yep.
So it's one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Is there anything we left out? I feel like we covered a lot of
Yeah.
ground.
I mean, it was good. I liked our like meandering too to like what felt like was like most interesting in the moment. It was good. I feel like we covered a lot.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
think we did too.
yeah. I mean, I think if there's anything, else specific to amino acids and then people are trying to figure out, and like maybe like guidelines, like from
Hmm.
here, okay, I'm trying to go make like, good decisions about, we talked about a lot, like what are the Cliff's notes maybe, and like where could you go from here? I think, l-
Actually, I have one more question.
okay.
I have one more thing
Yeah.
which I think that people might be thinking about.
Okay.
So we talked about around workouts and
Hmm.
first thing in the morning, mid afternoon. Do they need to be taken on their own? This is a question people ask all the time. Like, should I be taking, or can I take them with a meal? Does
Hmm.
it matter? So,
Yeah. Um, Anytime you take them, it is a good time to take them. And
good.
I'm not, and I've like worked on like how to communicate this to people, but that's the message I think that's most important. Anytime, what's most important is adherence. You
Hmm.
taking them is the thing that is going to change your body, your life, your experience, right? And
Yeah.
there are so many different reasons about when and why you would take them that are all good. So
Yeah.
if you take them outside of meal periods, the advantage that you're going to get is like, I just only kind of like to eat 3 meals a day, and I just, or I like to fast in the morning or whatever. If you go more than 3 4 hours without eating amino acids via a protein or a supplement, you're going to start to go into net muscle breakdown.
Mm.
That is what happens. Like that is what happens when you go through a fasting period of over more than a few hours. When you're young, it doesn't matter. So I think if you're young and you're not an athlete, if you're 20 years old and you're not an athlete, like I wouldn't be that worried about it. I'm not like you need to take amino acids every 3 hours, right? But as soon as you're over 30 and every decade after that becomes more important, I would be thinking about how can I get in protein or amino acids every few hours, because that is what's going to help maintain lean muscle. Because when I go
Hmm.
without it, I'm going into muscle breakdown. And I think an average fast of 12 hours a day is pretty normal, right? I have dinner, I
Yeah.
don't eat, go to bed, wake up in the morning, and then I could like break my fast. But
Yeah.
if you want like more time than that, like I really want to wait 16, like first thing when you wake up, take some amino acids,
Yeah.
because
And yeah.
it,
And
it'll ma-
also before those fasted workouts, like I used to do
yeah,
fasted workouts all the time. I never go to the gym now without
you'll eat away at your muscle.
having
It
my,
doesn't,
well,
yeah.
you just you get a
You'll
better
feel really,
workout.
you'll feel way
Yeah.
fatigued. You won't have as much energy, but you also, it's like it's not great for your muscle. You amplify the impact of your muscle by consuming it before. It's a multiplication effect by taking the amino acids before you work out.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
that said, I used to think, do I need to take them like when I eat? Like, is that like the best use case because I'm already getting protein, like maybe in a low protein meal? But this is what's so interesting in that it's changed a lot, I'd say, in the last 4 years, last 10 years, but there was a great article that came out in 2020 in Nutrients that broke down and did an analysis of all this different work that basically showed that because of this thing we talked about earlier with the mixed meals, and the
Hmm.
fact that they don't really stimulate protein synthesis, it's very little, so much more from consuming the essential amino acids. If you consume them with a meal, you actually ensure and you maximize the potential of the amino acids from the protein in the meal to be utilized to build new proteins and especially muscle in the body. So you're magnifying the effect. It's like a little mini workout combined with your meal to better utilize the protein, the amino acids in the meal. It was interesting. Actually, Arnie Ferrando, who's one of the authors on the International Society of Sports Nutrition position paper, is the one that really helped me understand that, and helped me walk through these different studies and understand, like, no, it's actually awesome for meals. Because, like, do you really need it for meals? And he's like, man, look at this. And again, if you're talking about people that are 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, it's like, wow, it's highly effective then. But then it's great before, during, and after exercise. It's great before bed. And so it's kind of like, my attitude would be,
Just take them.
just take them. Like, do you like having it with your lunch? Take them then. Do you like having it before your afternoon walk? Take it then. I would find some habit that you already do to anchor them to. Is it the first thing you do in the morning when you have water? Great. Is it like, do you currently have, I don't know, iced tea or a diet soda you really think you shouldn't be having at lunch, or something else? Like, are you making some other kind of, like, you replace it, Are you, are there just little, is there some kind of, like, there's some mid-morning snack that's, like, not really like your best option? It's like, could you replace it or just add it to that?
Yeah.
Snack
No,
thing,
my husband takes his supplements with his essential amino acids. He mixes up a glass, and I mean, you should see the concoctions he makes. He's one of those people, he doesn't actually care what it tastes like. He just puts it all in the glass, and I'm like, oh my God, that is absolutely revolting. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like,
and I'm one of those people that's like, because I think I grew up taking vitamins and supplements, like, capsules just don't bother me. So I just always have capsules with me. And so it's like, I take them first thing in the morning with creatine, and then there's a different supplement protocol I do at night. I take it with that, and then I take it if I'm exercising. And I take it too, like, if there's little things where I'm trying to participate with my family. I have young kids, and, like, I don't know, they want to go to, like, the bakery or something, and I'm like, man, like, what am I going to get at the bakery, or something? And it's like, I can have, like, half of the little thing that they had and take some aminos with it and be like, feel satiated and feel like I'm actually, like, but I didn't, like, blow my day and end up in this, like, terrible carb cycle at 10
sugar
a.m. in the
coma
morning.
with a chocolate croissant hanging out of your mouth.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many good ways to use them. I think they're all good times. Any time is a good time. I think the one thing I'd say is, if there's limits, it is more than 3 servings at once is not worth it. And I think, again, actually, the ISSN, their position paper came out and reported this through all the different studies. It's deemed safe up to 20 servings a day. So that gives you a lot of leeway. I can take 3 servings at once and up to 20. I mean, that's like, I doubt anyone's going to be pushing those boundaries.
Yeah, no. I mean, I would say the only time you might be even getting close is in a case like you found yourself as a 16-year-old.
I was going to say a clinical situation.
In a clinical situation, you might go crazy on the, like, really push the envelope. But other than that, I think we're
like,
good.
my in-laws are about to, and again, I would just name this, like, we did not formulate this product for medical situations.
No.
But that said, like my in-laws are about to have both of them need to have knee surgery, and they're going to have to, like, rotate on. Like, in that situation, I'm like, are you willing to take 3 servings? If you can, I think you should take them, like, really as many times a day as you're willing to. Like, that is my
flavor.
that is my advice to them in that situation, because one's in their 70s, the other one's in their 80s, and knee surgery is significant. They're not going to be mobile. If there's all the stress, it's like, go NASA on it. take 3 servings 6 times a day.
Actually, you know what? That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Call it the NASA protocol. Be an astronaut.
Yeah.
Like, off you go.
I mean, if you're bedridden, it's like the bedridden protocol. Like, in that case, I would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I now think that we've pretty much covered it all. We can keep diving down rabbit holes, but at this point, everybody's got things to do, including you. So we're going to tell people, why don't you tell people where they can learn more? We've got a 20% off code for people, which you can go to getkion.com/longevity, the new name of the podcast. And and is there, and getkion.com really
Yeah, I
is
think
the
that's really
website,
it. There's
right?
tons of information, tons of articles and blogs and information. I love that you got that. Wow, that's a good getkion.com/longevity. That's a power play. That's like the best. That's the best short URL that I think
Well,
anyone's
I was
got.
just super thrilled that I got longevity with Natalie Nidham as my podcast name,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Because
awesome.
it was when I thought of it and I went, oh, there's no way this is available. And it was. I was like, oh my God. Just do
I know.
it.
It's kind of crazy. Like people like knowing that's awesome. That's so cool. But yeah, I think that's really where to learn more about it. And there's tons of information, visuals, breakdowns, links to other
Yeah.
sites
And
if
you
you
can
need it.
take it as a drink or as tablets.
Hmm.
Tablets are great to stuff in your pocket and just munch on during the day. And the drinks, the mango is my favorite. Personally, mango is my favorite. I have to say, you did
Flavor
a
is the
great
thing.
job
It's
on that
been
one.
like the most surprising to me. It's so subjective. I like mango too. I like mango and lime. Lime's like the least sweet. Mango, I don't know. Mango just I like it. But
Something about mango.
some people swear by berry and swear by watermelon like it's the best ever. It's just I think different flavor profiles and probably amounts of like sweetness that people like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I always
Yeah.
want a little sour. So
Yeah.
anyway, Angelo, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks.
It's been a fun ride.
Thanks for having me, Natalie.
My pleasure.